Hey there, my name is Brad. Welcome back to the shop. Today is part 2 of the 2020 Breakout 117 Stage 4 kit. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. So I'm going to double check my piston rings one last time. Just make sure they're where I want them. Make sure that the oil rings are looking good. Having a hard time finding this one. Where are you? It's right around that little paint mark somewhere. Oh, it's right there. Okay. And then I'm gonna move these kind of like that. Move those kind of like that. Move the pistons back. So then I have my front cylinder, my front piston orientated just like that. But I'm gonna flip this towards me. I'm gonna take this piston and I'm gonna flip this piston towards me too. All right, so I start with where the end gap is. Like take that side for example. I'm gonna give you a little side shot. And then you get the end gap started first. And then I'm pushing in on the opposite side. And then I just use my fingernail to push it in and drop it down a little bit further. And then I do the same thing with the second ring. The key is to not pull it up and undo everything like I just did. But I'm just using my fingernail to push the piston ring into the ring land. And then since the gap is already in the cylinder, we're compressing it. We're using the cylinder and our fingernails to compress the ring and push it in. So same thing with the oil rail. You get the gap started, and then I go just around and just use my thumbnail, and then you just give it like a light little twisty. And it doesn't take very much pressure at all. Like if you're using a lot of pressure, then you have a piston ring that's stuck. And you should figure that out first before you start like jamming on it with a hammer. Alright, and that's it. So when we flip it back over, I'm trying to give you a little view of this. So when we flip it back over, the front cylinder is orientated the same way I have the motorcycle on the hoist, and then the little arrow is pointing forward, which is the correct way for this piston to be installed. And then we'll do the same thing with the rear piston and the rear cylinder. So flipping the cylinder, taking the piston, and then flipping the piston. There's a bunch of different ways of doing this. Obviously you can use a piston ring compressor. I like doing it like this because it gives me the best good feelings inside that the piston rings haven't been bent or damaged during installation. Like when you have a piston ring compressor around here and then you're hitting it with a hammer, these little oil control rings are so small and so thin that you could snap one and not even know it. And I guess I've always done it like this, so I've gotten really used to it. Makes it a lot easier if you can get both oil ring rails started at the same time. Like it just like that. It makes everything go just a little bit easier, I find. But same thing, I'm just gonna go through here. Just kind of walk this oil ring in with my nail. Just like that, everybody hops into place. And then when we look inside, our arrow is facing forward. And they're just about ready to be installed on the bike. Alright, so our pistons are on the cylinders, everything's ready to go there. We already have the new base gaskets on the vehicle. Before I put the base gaskets on the vehicle, I sprayed down a little rag like this and just made sure the aluminum surface was free of any type of debris. With the cylinders, I like to do the same thing. Just go around here. Make sure that there isn't any type of like debris or anything hanging out. And then everything is ready to slide in under the backbone, and I'll tap the piston back down just far enough for the wrist pin to slide out, and then to slide through the piston rod, I'll put the wrist pin clip in, all while the piston rings are still seated in the bore. So let's go do that. So I was having a bit of a brain fart. When I put the piston ring circlip in, I normally try to put it on the right side so I can work from the left side of the bike. But for whatever reason, I was thinking backwards. And when I put them in the piston already, I put both sides in the right side. No, sorry, I put both sides in the left side. Whatever, so we're gonna be working from the right side of this bike, but same situation. So here is how I tap the piston out, install the wrist pin, and then install the wrist pin clip. Here we go. So I've already cleaned up the base gasket surface. This is just gonna make it a little bit tougher because I have the camera stand over on this side. And when we get it about lined up, And we're tapping it out just enough for the wrist pin to show. I'm doing this all one-handed, just so everybody knows. You don't want to get all crazy and be tapping your piston right in the top of the connecting rod. That would be not cool. Very carefully. Get right there. Whew. There's a lot of things happening here at once. We gotta tap the piston out just a hair more. Alrighty. So that's where I normally put this side C-clip in first, so I can work from the left side, because it's a bit of a pain in the butt here with the lifter bore. Try to get myself some more room. Double check that everything's in, everybody's happy. All right. All right, that was a lot of work. Make sure your gasket's on your dowels. Shimmy your cylinder down. Just like that. I like to just put these little homemade tools on by hand. Nothing crazy here. Then I like to spin it over a couple times just to make sure that pistons come up to the top. You know that you have all the right parts in there, which we do, because the base gaskets will crush down just a little bit when we tighten the cylinder heads down. I spin it over just a couple more times, just because. No real reason. All right. Take these guys off. Well, the GoPro just overheated, so hopefully it didn't like lose any data or something. I guess we'll find out. But once the piston's up towards the top, I like to go through with some of the alcohol-based cleaner that we use. Just go around, clean up the top of the piston, make sure that the arrows are pointing forward like that. Roll the engine down, and then there's always like a little residual ring from that top piston ring. Clean that up. And do the same with the rear. I gotta find a better camera. Like, the GoPro is pretty okay. It's nice, but if the screen's on all the time, which you can only see from the back, then it's like the thing overheats. And then when you're working from the front side, you can't see what's going on. Like, you can't see the viewfinder or whatever because the screen's on the back. So I don't know if anybody has any recommendations out there, let me know, because I'd probably look into them. Alright, we're just gonna roll that one down a little bit. Alright, so everything's looking good. We're just going to go through, clean up our head gasket surface one last time right before we put the head gaskets on it. Alright, there we go. Just looking good. Excellent. So then we have our included head gaskets. I like to have the little dimples facing the same direction. Like, if it doesn't have a preference as far as what side's up and what side's down, I like for these little things to be pointing towards the inside. No real reason, just because. Now I'm gonna, off screen, I'm gonna clean up the cylinder heads. I'm gonna blow them out with our multi-purpose solvent. I'm gonna wipe down the bottom of the head gasket surface and then plop them bad boys up here. Oh yeah. I just got word that there's pizza upstairs and I'm being included, so that's nice. So I'm gonna plop these heads on here, lube up the bottom of the new head bolts. I'm just gonna put them in loosely. Probably clean up the rest of the hardware on the wire wheel and clean that off, and then go get some pizza. And give the GoPro a break to cool off. Alright, looking pretty snazzy. So I'm going to go do those things off screen. I'm going to go clean up the hardware, go get pizza, lube up the new head bolts. You just put a little bit of oil right under the face of it. You know, I'm not even going to oil it up first. I'm just going to put 2 in there, make sure that they don't like fall off. Alright, we're back at it. The pizza was pretty good. It was Jets. So you put a little bit of oil just right on the face of the cylinder head bolt, just like so. Not a lot. I'm going to go grab the other 2 that are already on the engine just to hold down the cylinder head. Do a little lube on them. Alright, now let's go put these in the cylinder heads. So we're just about to start tightening down the cylinder heads. I have this little binder that I put together. This is the revised torque sequence for if you're using multi-layer steel head gaskets. This information is provided in a newer kit. Like if you just bought any of the Screamin Eagle kits that come with these head gaskets, it should come with these instructions. But if you didn't know, the first torque is 20 to 30 foot-pounds. The second
is to loosen it 360 degrees. The third is to tighten it down to 9 to 11 foot-pounds. And the next one is then to 18 to 20 foot-pounds, and then 90 degrees. And then this kind of looks like a football play map, but this is like the front cylinder head and the rear cylinder head. I have it on the matching opposite page, so this is the first, second, third, fourth one to tighten down. And then likewise in the back, that's a first, second, third, fourth. So I just leave it in my chair kind of like that, so I can see it as I'm working on the motorcycle. So that is the process that I'm going to be using right now after I get the GoPro set up. So I'm just going to run everybody down just so everything's nice and happy. Alright, I'm just going to walk around on the other side, make sure that nothing crazy happened, like we didn't pinch any wiring and everything looks right. Just because. Alright, so that first step, we're just going to do 30 foot-pounds. So we will start right here. Alright, and then the next step is to loosen all of them one full turn. Alright, so everybody's happy with that. Then we go to 11 foot-pounds. So I'm just gonna, 11 foot-pounds is like obviously hardly anything, but I'm just gonna run the screws down so I'm not flinging around my big expensive torque wrench. Alright. $11 foot-pounds we are. Alright, everything's good with 11 foot-pounds. So the next one is 20 foot-pounds. You can see that? Yep, 20. Same deal. It's 20.9. I'll accept that. All right, so then the next is 90 degrees. So I gotta go lay this on a table so it can figure out what to do. All right, it zeroed itself. 90 degrees we are. All right, I'm probably gonna have to switch places with you. $90 degrees. Here we go. Perfect. 1, 2. Perfect. So everything's good in the hood, and everything's looking good. At this point, I'm going to put in the knock sensors, the engine temperature sensor on the other side, Also the induction module, because it's so much easier doing it now before putting the lower rocker boxes on. And then we still have to do the cam and all of that, but I just wanted to clear up my table. Things were getting a little busy around my bay with stuff sitting out, so I just wanted to get the cylinders and the heads and the pistons on. So that's how come I did it like this. I normally don't. I normally do the cam, then this part, but let's continue on. If you wanted to know the torque spec for a knock sensor, it is 13 to 17 foot-pounds. I just looked it up because I'm fancy like that. The engine temperature sensor is 11 to 16 foot-pounds. But the tool spreads at like right at 11, so you aren't going to get much more than 11 foot-pounds on that with this little guy. I'm going to do the ACRs too. The ACR torque is 17 to 19 foot-pounds. That's 18.9 foot-pounds, just in case you wanted to know. I really like this thing. It's a lot nicer than the twin cam tool that had a slit in the center, so then the tool would spread open. It was a real pain in the butt. I'm glad I complained a lot to get this thing. It was worth it. Perfect. Here we are. We have the new throttle body and then the old one. They look pretty different even through the viewfinder. So we're going to take these flanges. We're going to get rid of these O-rings. Well, they aren't O-rings, but you know, intake seals. Toss them in the garbage. The new kit comes with a new induction module. The new kit comes with new intake flange seals. So all we're really going to be reusing is this fuel line and its little plastic deal thing and the T-map sensor. You want to be careful with the fuel line though, because the fuel injectors, they have this little tab to index them correctly. That's important because there's 4 holes on this fuel injector and it sprays into 2 valves. So you don't want to like turn it sideways because it's going to mess up the spray pattern. You'll get a bunch of fuel in one valve and not enough in the other. And I've seen that where it's cracked before, so. Sometimes these things are in here like super friggin' tight too. You just wiggle your old injectors out. Usually I do this over a bunch of cloths because there's usually fuel in it. I'm just going to pull the that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over a bunch of cloths and I'm just going to pull out the fuel injector and let all the gas run out of it. While we're here, we might as well pull out the T-map sensor. You want to pull straight out so you don't break this thing, because all the important guts are right at the bottom. Alright, that goes with the takeoff parts. So let's start with this because it stinks the most. I'll put a little bit of silicone paste on it. It's just like a little lube. Just like the lightest amount ever. Will help them slide right in there. You want to be careful that you don't like jam it and pack it up in the injector itself or something crazy. So those things are looking good. Okay, here we go. We got this thing. And then this thing, we said we'd put this thing in first. Again, we have our tabs lined up there correctly. You can see that. Very carefully. She just pops right into place. You'll notice those screws didn't have Loctite on them before. I'm sure that's because they went into a brass ferrule and a plastic intake manifold. But I'll show you in the instructions. It tells you to put Loctite on them now. So those are good. I just lubricated the hole this thing goes in. Oh yeah. Alright, so it says that these instructions come in the kit. You want to be careful with this kit because it says that it's for experienced riders only. All the horsepower in this kit can probably get you in trouble. So, but seriously though, it says applies a few drops of Loctite, blue stuff, 33 to 53 inch-pounds on the fuel rail screw, and 30 to 32 inch-pounds on the T-map sensor. So I got this little beam boy. We're gonna go, let's just call it 30 and 40 just to make that easy to remember. This thing's awesome. I bought it on Amazon. It was super expensive. I've used it like 4 times, but I love it. So I'll put a link in the description, but nobody hassle me. I really wanted it. I don't like buying cheap torque wrenches. I originally got this one to do the rockers on, like the front lower rockers for Springer suspensions. That's what I bought it for, and I've only used it like 2 times. So anything under like 70 inch-pounds, my clicker torque wrenches aren't good for that. So, or yeah, 70 inch-pounds. So this thing's good for it. Love this thing though. Like, it just has a good feel to it. Whatever. So these things are all torqued up. And then for the intake seal flanges, these can go on either side. It doesn't really matter. You can tell like where it's already kind of like dimpled out for the screw that's going to be there ultimately, like that. I like to put a little bit of lube on them, especially this well, specifically this assembly lube. It gives them such a nice feel when you're putting them in, and it keeps the flange from like trying to fall off. It just makes it so easy. And then after I get the engine fully assembled, like if any of the shmoo is shmooed out from anywhere, I just use our alcohol-based parts cleaner, and it just cleans it right off. So that makes it nice and easy. So now I'm going to go start these 2 screws in the cylinder head, so that when we slide this induction module in, all we have to do is put the top 2 screws in. Induction module time. See, with that assembly lube, like, it keeps everything in place. It makes it a whole lot easier to work with. We still need to be very careful about like not knocking anything off. Because it's still a super tight fit. I need to rotate this a little bit like that, a little bit like that. Then I'm going to look over, make sure everything's lining up. There we go, piece of cake. 50 seconds, that's how long it took. Alright, now let's go tighten up the screws from the other side. This is called a rocker. No, this is an intake seal flange wrench. It's a little ball Allen on the end of a little wrench. Bought this out of the Screamin Eagle catalog. It makes this job pretty easy. It works on everything from like Sportster, not Sportsters. Sportsters have like a little hex head here instead of this Allen head, but it works on like Evo, Twin Cam, all the stuff. Milwaukee-Eight. Make sure that they're nice and tight. Don't bust your knuckles on the cylinder fins. Oh yeah, good stuff. Alright, that was pretty easy. So the next thing I'm going to do, since I'm already here, you know, I was thinking about putting the lower rocker boxes on. It doesn't really matter. Let's go to the other side and pull the cam chest off. Hopefully we can get that done and get going on with that. Since I just put on a set of fresh gloves, I'm going to use this time to pump up these lifters and put them in this jar from Jim's to bleed them, and also lubricate the inner cam bearing. Just make sure we get some fresh oil in there so it's more or less packed with oil. So it should spins nice. Let's all wish these Screamin' Eagle lifters a happy life. Hopefully we never have to pull them back out of the engine again. The tip of this thing usually fits like right in lifter, or like the right inside the oil hole for the lifter pretty well. But leave it up to Screamin' Eagle to like change it up just a little bit so it doesn't work well. Just my luck, but she'll be just fine. We'll pull a vacuum on this and you'll see all the air come out of it. So while we let the lifters sit in the oil and just take a spa day, the next thing to do is to pop off the cam cover, pull off the timing chain, the old camshaft, the oil pump, the cam plate. I'm going to put all that stuff in here, just in this bin, and then ultimately I will clean and we'll reuse the oil pump and the cam plate because this already has the latest generation in it. And we'll pull the inner cam bearing and put in the new inner cam bearing, and let's get going. Now that we have the inner cam bearing installed already and everything's all set and ready to go to put the oil pump and the camshaft in, I like to use the alcohol-based cleaner and just clean up the bottom threaded holes that fill up with oil. Blow that out. And then when I install the lifters, I like to install them with the oil fill holes pointing all in the same direction. It's not necessary, it doesn't really matter, but that's just the way that I like to do things, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just pulling the lifters out of the jar that we were bleeding them in and rotating them around. And I just stick the camshaft in there just for the time being, so that if a lifter does drop down a little bit, then it won't just like fall out of the engine. Even though previously I had put the thick Screamin Eagle assembly lube up in the lifter bore, it will hold the lifters up there. So everything looked great with the oil pump. No problems there, which is great because it's basically brand new. I just went through and cleaned it up with our alcohol-based cleaner again and blew it dry. Inspected everything. This is where I like to use the Torco engine assembly lube. It's on the oil pump. And I put the assembly lube anywhere where metal spins on other pieces of metal, so that way it helps to build up oil pressure like instantly, and then everything's already lubed, so you don't have to worry about any type of problems. I like to lube up the oil pump and put it together like in a module or an assembly, and then slide it onto the end of the crankshaft as I'm rotating the engine around with the rear tire. Again, that's just the way that I like to do things. You don't have to do things like this, and if you see somebody and they aren't doing it like this, that's just fine too. It's just the way I like to do it. You could just put the pump on the end of the crankshaft like each individual component, but you can do that if you want. Doesn't matter. Put a little bit of lube on the end of the crankshaft, just for good measure. And then I'm going to have the engine in 6th gear so that it's easy to turn over with the rear tire. And I'm just putting a little bit of just the slightest amount of pressure on the puncture rotor, and then turning the engine over, and it aligns both the feed and the scavenge pump. And once it gets to just the right spot, you can feel it, and then I send it home and click it into the O-ring that I've already put into the engine case. So we already have the lifters in, the cam's already in and it's lubed up. Obviously the oil pump's all lubed up. You can see the Torco is on the cam plate because I put it on there too, like where the camshaft goes through, and then there's also a thrust surface on the back side of the cam plate for the camshaft. And then where the puncture rotor is going to press up against the cam plate. I'm just saying, all of those parts I lube up. We have all of our hardware cleaned up with Loctite. And then again, follow the service manual for the absolute correct answer and the right way to do this. But I'm just going to speed up as we roll the bolts in, tighten them down. And then I like to spin the tire over, like in the same direction the engine's spinning, as I tighten up the oil pump bolts. Again, that's just me. So then we need to make sure that our sprockets are in line so that the chain is going to be driving perfectly straight. There's different size shims that go behind the sprocket for the camshaft. I want to say it had a 120 thousandths shim already. I want to say I put on a 140 thousandths shim. So what I do, I just put the sprockets up on there, and then I hold them up and I use my thumb, and after you do a bunch of them, you can get a pretty good idea of how high or how low you are just by feel. So that's what I do. And then just to confirm, obviously you want to go in with an actual real measuring tool and confirm that you have things right. You want to tighten down both sprockets to the normal torque. It's wise if you use the original bolts to do this, and then once everything's perfect, then you put in a new set of bolts. But you get your locking tool in there, tighten down the sprockets, and then you'll go across the face of the sprockets with a straight edge. And then with your 10,000ths feeler gauge, you'll try to shove it up below the straight edge. And if you can't get it through, then you're in good shape. Then all we have left in the cam compartment is to put on the tensioner, a new gasket, and obviously the cam cover. Loctite everything and torque it down. Now we're going to put the lower rocker box covers on. I've already removed the old gasket, cleaned them off, and normally I do this part like with the rocker box cover laying down on a table. It was much more difficult to do it up in the air like this, but just doing it in case anybody wants to see what the gasket looks like or how it fits in the channel or whatever. But you want to clean out that lower rocker box cover gasket channel really well, so then the gasket fits in there and it fits snug so that it doesn't try to fall out as you're sticking it in there, you know, into the frame and on top of the cylinder head. It's pretty easy. And then you want to make sure that you have your ACR wire routed to like the center, because you have to stick the wiring through before it can fully sit down into position. And then it really just has 4 perimeter screws and 1 in the center. Obviously you want to take your old hardware, clean it up, put new Loctite on it. But we've covered a lot of ground in this video, so this is going to conclude part 2 of this series. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Watch for part 3 where we put the rest of the bike together. And see you next time. Bye.